distance. Officials say the capture of Kiev remains Russia's primary military objective. Gunfire and explosions have been heard throughout the capital, and fighting has broken out on the streets. The mayor of Kiev has imposed a curfew from tonight until Monday morning, and citizens are being warned to seek shelter. In an address to the nation, President Zelensky urged the Russian people to tell Moscow to back down.
I want absolutely everyone in Russia to hear me. Thousands of victims, hundreds of prisoners who simply can't understand why they were sent to Ukraine to die, to kill others. The sooner you tell your government the war must be stopped immediately, the more of your people will be kept alive. We can see that there are demonstrations of your citizens who are against the war. We need to end this war. We can live in peace, in global peace, in human peace.
Well, the UN Refugee Agency says more than 120,000 Ukrainians have left the country since Russia began its invasion. The aid agency is also warning that fuel, cash and medical supplies are running low in parts of the country, which could drive up to 5 million people to flee abroad. Mark Kovalenko, a Ukrainian businessman who's waiting with thousands of others to cross into Poland, says he must leave his country because no one will come to help.
I want to survive because I have a family in Europe. So right now in Ukraine is a dangerous place because Russian forces come from more, and every day is strange time. USA and NATO don't help us, so we don't have any chosen. We must do this something for survival.
Well, Labour MP Stephen Kinnock told GBNews that if Russia attacks a NATO member country, that would be an attack on all of NATO.
So much as considered putting a single military boot on the ground into any of those NATO countries, then the consequences for him will be swift and they will be catastrophic. And that is what I think we have to make absolutely clear to him now, whilst doing everything we can to arm the resistance in Ukraine so that we stand with our friends and partners and allies against this tyrant and gangster that Mr. Putin really is.
Well, back here, protests in support of Ukraine have been taking place in London, Edinburgh and Manchester. In London, eggs have been thrown at the Russian embassy during pro-Ukrainian protests. GB News' Inaya Falarin Iman was there.
We've heard people saying Putin out, we've heard stop the war. We've also heard a lot of people actually having placards when it's putting pressure on the international community to actually remove Russia from the SWIFT banking system. That is an international banking system that enables money to move around internationally quite easily, and I think that increasingly people are putting pressure on that to be one of the ways in which diplomatically people go further. And I think speaking to some of the people there is just this sense that not enough is being done, that there is violence and bloodshed going on, but actually there does seem to be a kind of resistance from the international community to do more.
The UK, US, Canada and the European Union have announced plans to impose rare personal sanctions on President Vladimir Putin and his Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. At a resolution meeting in New York last night, the United Nations Security Council failed to pass a motion that would call on Moscow to ceasefire and withdraw its troops because it was vetoed by Russia. China, India and the United Arab Emirates abstained from the vote. The Home Secretary has cancelled the visas of the Belarusian men's basketball team who are due to play in Newcastle tomorrow night. Priti Patel tweeted, "The UK will not welcome the national sports teams of those countries who are complicit in Putin's unprovoked and illegal invasion of Ukraine." Well, to other news, and the Education Secretary Nadeem Zadawi has told GB News schools won't be allowed to close ever again.
I am determined that we continue to live with this virus. We'll have other variants, I'm certain of it, whether one in the summer and one in the autumn, but never again will we ask children to be out of school.
Well, this is GB News. You're up to date. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, let's return to Nana Akua.
So good afternoon. You're watching GB News. I'm Nana Akua. It's just gone 7 minutes after 4 o'clock. Now, before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. We'll bring you the latest with the unfolding crisis in Ukraine throughout the show, as Russian troops continue their invasion and edge even closer to capturing the capital city, Kiev. We'll get the latest from our Home and Security editor, Mark White, in a few moments' time. Then, of course, we've got our Great British debate this hour. Western countries continue to impose sanctions on Russia, but the penalties seem to be doing very, very little to stop the slow the invasion of Ukraine. So I'm asking, how can we stop Putin? Plus, we'll hear what you think about the events in Ukraine in the latest instalment of GB Voices. And from Harry and Meghan's comments on Ukraine to the Queen's health, we'll bring you up to date on the latest royal news. That's coming up in the next hour. Tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk, or why not tweet me at GBNews. Well, of course, let's start this hour and get the latest from the news on Ukraine as Russia continues its invasion on the country. Let's go to Home and Security editor Mark White. Mark, what can you tell us?
Nana, good afternoon. It's difficult with all of the news that's coming out of Ukraine, the claims and counter-claims that are coming out of that region to get a proper handle on exactly what's happening. So it's always good when we get official, reliable information, as far as we're concerned, coming through from official sources. Now, the UK Ministry of Defence have been carrying out analysis. They did some analysis overnight. They have, of course, intelligence assets on the ground, satellite imagery. They're in constant contact with forces on the ground there in Ukraine as well. As you may have heard in the news bulletin, some significant lines coming out from the Ministry of Defence here in the UK. They say that the Russian advance has temporarily slowed down, probably due to logistical issues and because of fierce Ukrainian resistance. They are putting up a very significant fight against those Russian forces who are attacking on many different fronts right across Ukraine. The Ministry of Defence also saying that it appears that Russia is bypassing some of the major centres of population, instead leaving significant numbers of troops to encircle those centres of population, and that Kiev, it appears, remains their primary objective. Now, there was reports of fierce battles overnight in and around Kiev. There were missile strikes, of course, at facilities and indeed residential areas in the capital as well. But what the Ministry of Defence in the UK say, their analysis tells them, is that those fights were probably limited to advanced groups of special forces, paratroopers who came in initially on the ground, were engaged in battle. The main military convoy, if you like, the armoured convoy of Russian military is still a few miles from Kiev itself. We've also been hearing today from President Zelensky, who has appealed directly to people, friends of Ukraine, to go to that country and take up arms to help defend his country. Now, that's not military personnel from the UK or other countries that he's asking for. He knows he's not going to get that. No NATO country is going to put boots on the ground. Instead, he's just asking people, ordinary members of the public, perhaps those who've had military service and experience in handling firearms, to get to Ukraine. And he says they'll be given weapons and they'll be put in harm's way to defend that nation. Quite how they will get there, given the chaos on the ground and just how insecure that region is another matter. But that's what President Zelensky has called for today. Now, a former Ukrainian president, Petro Poroshenko, has been speaking today as well, and he has donned a flak jacket, he's carrying a weapon, he's on the front line with the troops He has said, echoing what the British Ministry of Defence has been reporting, that the Ukrainian military is putting up a very significant fight. Now, they have been using British-provided weapons, British-supplied and US-supplied anti-tank and anti-air shoulder-launched missile systems that they've been equipped with and trained in. The Ukrainians are calling for much more of that, and indeed, the British Armed Forces Minister James Heappey has said that he will and 25 other NATO countries will provide lethal aid to Ukraine. Again, he wouldn't go into the details about how they will get these weapon systems into Ukraine, given the security situation on the ground. But former President Poroshenko said that those systems had been used along with other weapons to bring down 20 Russian aircraft. He also claims that they have disabled more than 100 Russian tanks and 1,000, he says, 1,000 armoured personnel carriers. They also claim to have killed 3,500 Russian troops. How accurate all of the information is, we don't know. We can only quote someone who is a significant figure in Ukraine. This is what he is claiming. It echoes what the Ukrainian military was claiming earlier today. And it appears backed up by a lot of the information now coming out, Nana, from the UK Ministry of Defence. Some very significant lines coming out this afternoon.
Well, thank you for that, Mark, and obviously keep us updated throughout the programme. That's Mark White. He's our Home and Security Editor on GB News. So good afternoon. You're with me, Nana Akua, either watching on TV, listening on radio or online. Now, we've been complicit in all of this war business. We've created a situation which has enabled the likes of Russia and China to amass inconceivable wealth whilst developing a childlike reliance on them for goods and, more importantly, a reliance on them for our vital services. We are completely at their mercy, and the only way we can start helping is by investing in ourselves. Now, we've sold off things like steel, water and energy and created global supply chains, which are great when all is well in the world, but these fall apart when war or global events occur and other countries in that chain choose to prioritise their own citizens. COVID is a pretty obvious example of that, because we had repeatedly farmed out the purchasing of our healthcare products like PPE to China. We simply did not have the supply or capacity to create what was needed. So the government went about throwing money at the wall as people died in their thousands. Some, I can imagine, needlessly and possibly due to the exposure to the virus because of badly made PPE. We are pretty much drunk on cheap products from abroad. So when it matters, we are vulnerable. Looking at the war in Ukraine, I can see how the inaction of the West, which is part of the problem, has come about. Superpower Germany, in particular, has been slow to respond because, well, they've got gas to think about. Countries around the world are slowly falling into line, although no one country has been prepared to put its head above the parapet, in large part because Russia have nuclear weapons and, of course, because of vested interests like the SWIFT banking service. The Ukrainian people, however, are stoic in their resistance. And President Zelensky, well, he's a hero in my eyes. He didn't run away or fly off in a helicopter packed with money and desert his people like the Afghan president. He is there, fighting to save his people, his country, and their way of life. So the West, entangled in a financial web with Russia and indeed China, who appear to be united, watches on paralysed. Vladimir Putin doesn't really come across as someone with a sense of humour. I mean, if you're prepared to bomb your own people, and let's face it, Ukraine was in the Soviet Union for longer than it's been out of it, when you make a clear threat to people outside of that and warn of unimaginable consequences for those who intervene, you are to be taken at your word. Putin is a man on a mission to reunite parts of his so-called lost empire. He will, by the looks of things, go on to any lengths to make this happen. So perhaps we need to reassess our vulnerabilities. We talk of levelling up, but how about this for a plan? Reopen the coal mines, frack for shale gas and extract North Sea oil. That will level up the UK. Most of this country's true wealth is up north, and for the life of me, I can't think of any conceivable reason why we simply don't get on with this. This country was made great by investing in itself. No man is an island. This was a book famously written by John Donne. He expressed how we are all connected. He argues that people need each other and are better together than they are in isolation, because every individual is one piece of a greater whole than its humanity itself. He's right. We need to work together, but the only way we can help each other is by having a sense of independence and freedom to make that happen. So, right, let's get started. Welcome back to my panel, former Liberal Democrat MP Lembit Opik and Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson. So, thank you very much for joining me. It's lovely to see you guys for a while. You've been on your travels. You've been away, Lembit. What have you been doing?
I was...
Not literally, not all of it.
I was on...
It would take too long.
I was in business in Bulgaria. I just came back this morning. Bulgaria is, if you like, 2 countries away from Ukraine. All the dark humour is about that. All of the pathos, all the commentaries about that. They don't think they're going to be invaded. But they actually feel that to some extent the West is responsible here because we are so weak. Biden is not treated seriously. Johnson's seen as a joke. And so they think Putin, who they respect, whether you like him or not, they respect him. He's taken his chance when he thinks, as far as they're concerned, it won't go nuclear. And so there is this difficult situation, and probably about 8 different people said this to me. This is the Cuban Missile Crisis back to front. In 1962, America played a strong-arm game with the Russians. We'll go into the details why. This time, Putin's doing it the other way around. Now, the Americans won that time. They think Putin will win this time.
Well, it depends what winning looks like, to be honest. Calvin, what do you make of all of this? And nice to see you as well. Your afro is looking fabulous.
Thank you. It's getting back to its full length, isn't it?
How big are you going to go with it?
As big as it will get.
That'll be interesting.
But I'm being very cautious on this. I know I'm usually foolhardy and have a strong opinion on things, but you know, I think we know the pretext, but we don't necessarily know the reason. And I think over the last couple of years, we've learned that mainstream media doesn't always tell us the full picture. In fact, it quite often doesn't tell us the truth. So I'm being very cautious and taking everything that I hear with a pinch of salt and everything that I see with a pinch of salt from both sides. I'm not an expert in Russia or the Ukraine, and I think over the last couple of days I've seen so many armchair experts on television and in the media waffling on, and I won't be doing that. So I'll give my opinion on the situation, but I can't really talk from an expert position.
So what is your opinion on the situation then?
In that war is always bad, and what we can do from here is we can pray for the innocents who are going to get dragged into this horrible mess that our politicians have created, and that no one wins in this situation.
No. Would you say that the West is complicit in some respect?
See, that is an area that I won't speculate on.
But in a way, what you've said, number one, is very mature, much more mature than much of the dialogue, the monologues we hear on Western media.
Thank you.
Number two, the Bulgarians would tend to agree with you. And here's why, I can say it in a sentence. They think the West has caused the situation because Putin saw weakness. He's angry about the fact that NATO is trying to go right onto his border. And as a result of that, he's taken action. It seems to me, I haven't got data for this, but the qualitative feedback I get, I work with a lot of Russians, it's a very popular move in Russia. And as such...
Really?
Yes, yes, because Putin is putting a stop to what looks like Western opportunism. You might even use the word imperialism. And that's when it gets complex.
I mean, it's for me, looking at the situation, I would say the situation is worrying. I don't like war. I don't like to see people being hurt. I don't like the fact that innocent people would be dragged into it. If they wanted to fight in this way, there must be a better way that they could try and negotiate and do this. And this whole thing about taking over and uniting and having this big glot of a country and trying to revert back to the Soviet Union, I can't see the positive result of that at the end of it. I can't see what Putin will gain from that. What will he get out of it?
Well, he'll be the first premier of Russia that's actually expanded the territory in decades.
But you've got people in there.
Yeah.
So it's all very well you thinking you've overtaken it, but if the people, and obviously by all counts the Ukrainian people, are standing up and fighting, you've got to convince those people to follow you.
This is when it gets really tricky, Nana, because there's no doubt, we get this information from Western filter. I was like, this morning, I was 500 miles away from the front line, and it's a different view there. They're more sanguine. They're not concerned. Bulgarians don't think that Putin's going to invade there. But they would say it like this. Putin feels threatened by NATO. NATO has broken some promises, which are very technical, but we won't get into. And Putin has said, according to them, and these aren't necessarily pro-Russian people, say Putin warned and warned and warned and warned and warned. We ignored it. He's taken action. Short, sharp shock while the West is weak, then consolidate. That's what I think is going to happen.
Do you think it would have been any different under Trump?
Yes, I don't think that he would have done it. I think that he would have regarded Trump as volatile and unpredictable. He thinks Biden is passive and predictable. And while Britain is weak, and Britain is definitely being regarded as weak internationally, he's taken a chance. And it is a risk, of course. Let me say something that nobody wants to say. This could go nuclear.
Well, I you know what, I mentioned this yesterday. And the reason why, of course, is because Putin has made a threat, which is a clear threat, that if anybody dares to get involved, he's prepared to strike in some way. And to me, that sounds like a nuclear threat. And obviously, you can't be sure, and you don't want to scare people. But as I said, somebody who's prepared to weaponise and sort of put bombs on a country that was part of his own country not even that long ago. And there'll be people who are related to people who are in Russia, who live in Ukraine. I can't imagine that he would have much feelings for those of us outside it.
Two parts to that. He's destroyed, at the moment, for the time being, the ability of Ukraine to have old-fashioned nuclear weapons pointing at Russia. But the second thing is, I'm here on your show because my parents had to flee the Soviet Union. Right. Members of my family were killed by the Soviet Union. I've got no reason to support Russia, but I've got a reason to say this. We ignored the warnings, and now we're dealing with the consequences, and so is Ukraine. Well,
it is a frightening thing. Do you think, Calvin, in your views, that it would have been any different if Trump had been in power?
Of course it would. You know, it's the old saying that hard times create strong leaders create good times create weak leaders, and weak leaders create hard times. And right now we're in a situation where we have weak leaders all across the West, and we're creating hard times. But that does mean that we'll have some good leaders coming up soon.
Well, they can't get much worse, can they?
I mean, Macron, Trudeau, Biden, very, very weak leaders.
What about Boris Johnson? Is he on that list as well?
He
doesn't want to say much today. Well, there you go. Well, if you've just joined me, where have you been? You're with me, Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. After the break, it's time for our Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, how can we stop Putin? Russia's continuing its assault on Ukraine, and now Western nations are appealing to the Russian people to stand up against the war, with Prime Minister Boris Johnson recording this message.
And to my Russian friends, я не верю, что эта война от вашего имени.
So, is appealing to Russian hearts and minds to show Putin their disdain for the invasion the right way to put a stop to this? I'll be discussing that after the break. Send us emails, though. Get in touch. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Tell me your thoughts, your views. Also, you can get in touch via Twitter @GBNews. And there's a poll up right now asking, how can we stop Putin? First, it's time for a short break.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
So good afternoon, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. It's just gone 27 minutes after 4 o'clock and it's time for our Great British Debate. And today I'm asking, how can we stop Putin? Get your thoughts in and your views in to us on Twitter. Right, so Russia continues its invasion of Ukraine, with Russian forces now closing in on the capital, Kiev. Western nations have introduced sanctions and are now appealing to the Russian people to protest against the conflict, with Prime Minister Boris Johnson recording this message.
And to my Russian friends, я не верю, что эта война от вашего имени.
So is appealing to Russian hearts and minds the right way to end the crisis, or are more sanctions or even a no-fly zone better solutions? I'm joined now by someone who's on the border with Western Ukraine, Piotr Drabik, is the editor of Z Radio in the Polish capital of Warsaw. Piotr, before we talk about solutions to the crisis, tell us a bit about the increasing numbers of refugees that are coming over the border to your country. How is Poland coping?
Good afternoon. From last 4 days, Polish authorities say about 100,000 refugees which came from Ukraine to Poland, looking for the shelter, basic help, and so on. Of course, we're waiting for the more refugees, mostly in the far eastern Poland. A lot of Poles try to help with own initiative. A lot of private cars go to the Przemysl. This is a city which is located very close to Ukrainian border and offer the free ride on all countries. Today, Polish government announcement free tickets for all Ukrainians on the Polish rails can travel across the Poland and go to other Western countries. Of course, this is extraordinary situation. I can remember a similar situation in last 30 years in Poland. Of course, for now, we have approximately 1 or 2 million Ukrainians which here working and study and so on. But in next month, if this war will be not stopped, we will absorb much more numbers of the refugees.
What is the general feeling amongst the Polish people about the war? What are you hearing on the streets? What are people saying?
From last days, I see on my friends, on the people on the streets, in trams, in bus, something like people feel fears and checking news, looking for the fresh information from the Ukraine, and everybody asking what is the red line for Putin. Putin will stop on the border with Poland, thinking about the new Iron Curtain in the middle of Europe. From last night, we have information about the attacks also very near cities close to the Polish border in Lutsk and Lviv city. So this is not a situation where we talk about the war like 2,000 or 3,000 kilometers from Warsaw or from Krakow. We talk about the attacks, we talk about the war very close to Polish border. Most of the Poles try to find the answer of this question. And of course, this is something completely new. Most of the Poles, like my generation, don't remember the communism time, don't remember the war time, and everybody just try to find the answer of these very hard questions.
Boris Johnson's message then to the Russian people is calling on them to sort of protest and sort of against the war. And would you suggest that is a good thing that they should be doing as well?
Of course, most of the Poles give a lot of solidarity for the Ukrainians. Yesterday I was just at the front of the Russian embassy. By the way, in Warsaw we have approximately the biggest Russian embassy in Europe. And I saw the hundreds of people which screaming against Putin and saying we need to stop this war. For now, of course, most of the Poles try to organize the help, collect the money, stuff like clothes and so on. As I said a few minutes ago, some of these people also just try to go to the eastern Poland and physically help these people. But of course, the protest is not enough. Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki and most of the Polish political parties say we need the strong sanction. We need to do something more than in last year because Putin maybe will not stop only on Ukraine. Baltic state, Poland, or other countries in Central Eastern Europe could be a next target of the Kremlin.
So much for speaking to us, and it's a terrible situation, and we hope that somehow it stops and quickly to minimise any casualties. Piotr, it's really good to talk to you. Thank you so much. That's Piotr Drabik. He's the editor of Radio Z, talking to us in Poland. Well, let's have a quick look at what you've been saying. Mike says, we can't stop him. Tim says a no-fly zone would do the trick and stop the Russians getting air superiority. Ash says we should cut all ties with Russia and all non-democratic nations and not be dependent on them. Keep those thoughts coming. Your ideas and views are very, very interesting indeed. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Still to come, we'll continue the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, how can we stop Putin? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, Lembit Opik and Calvin Robinson. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Thank you. It's 4:33. I'm Miranda Shunker in the GB newsroom. The British Ministry of Defence says Russia's advance into Ukraine has temporarily slowed, likely to be caused by logistical problems and strong resistance. Officials say the capture of Kiev remains Russia's primary military objective. Gunfire and explosions have been heard throughout the capital, and citizens are being warned to seek shelter. The UN Refugee Agency says more than 120,000 Ukrainians have left the country since Russia began its invasion. The aid agency is also warning that fuel, cash and medical supplies are running low in parts of the country, which could drive up to 5 million people to flee abroad. Protests in support of Ukraine have been taking place in London, Edinburgh and Manchester. In London, eggs have been thrown at the Russian embassy. GB News' Inaya Falarin Iman was there. Moving on, and the UK, US, Canada and the European Union have announced plans to impose personal sanctions on President Vladimir Putin and his Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Well, it comes as Russia vetoed a United Nations motion calling on Moscow to withdraw its troops. China, India and the United Arab Emirates abstained from the vote. And the Home Secretary has cancelled the visas of the Belarusian men's basketball team who are due to play in Newcastle tomorrow night. Priti Patel tweeted, "The UK will not welcome the national sports teams of those countries who are complicit in Putin's unprovoked and illegal invasion of Ukraine." Well, on TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Stay with us. We'll be straight back to Nana Akua after this short break.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
So if you've just joined me, welcome on board. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. And we return to our great British debate this hour. And I'm asking, how can we stop Putin? Heavy fighting continues in Ukraine, with Russian forces closing in on the capital city of Kiev. As widespread protests against the conflict break out in Russia, Boris Johnson recorded this message appealing to the Russian people.
And to my Russian friends, я не верю, что эта война от вашего имени.
So will appealing to the Russian public to stand against the invasion be enough to stop it? Or will we need to impose further sanctions and a no-fly zone, or even put boots on the ground? Let's see what my panel think of this. I'm joined by Lembit Opik and also Calvin Robinson. So Calvin, I'm going to come directly to you then. Do you see any way of stopping Putin?
I don't know about any ways to stop Putin, but what I do see is that there's a farce going on. We claim that, Western democracies can work together, and in the UN they tried to sanction Russia, and the UN Russia vetoed it within the UN Security Council. So the whole situation is a farce. NATO needs to act on what NATO was put together to act for. In regards to where do we go democratically, I think it's interesting that sport teams are stepping up and saying, actually, we don't want to go to Russia if this is how you're going to act. And Poland is very sound on a lot of issues, and they've been one of the countries that have said, our football team's not going to enter then.
Well, there shouldn't be anything going on in... I mean, if people are prepared to even enable that in any way, shape or form, then I think they have to be... I can't understand why you would want to go there anyway.
I'll be interested to see what people think about what I'm about to say now. Let's put this on the table. Members of my family were killed by the Soviet Union. That's why I'm here. I said that before. So, if anything, I've got an emotional reason to be against Putin. But that's not really the whole picture. Putin's been warning he would do this for about 3 years. Why? Because Putin does not want to have NATO right up next to his borders. And
well, why? They're a peacekeeping force. They're only supposed to be there to help other nations. They're not supposed to get involved in actual conflict. So what's the problem? It's not as though they're planning to invade.
Fair play if that's what NATO is really about. But NATO, from a Russian perspective, is a Western arm. It's about containing Russia, quite literally containing Russia. Estonia, where my parents come from, on the west, and potentially Ukraine on the east. And what Putin said, having achieved pretty much all of his other mission objectives as Premier of Russia, is, I'm not going to let you do this, guys. And the Russian perspective, especially in parts of Ukraine itself, where 78% of people in some of those areas are actually Russian-holding passport owners, are saying, actually, we're quite comfortable with this. What should we do? The question you've asked is quite poignant. It's actually quite loaded. How do we stop Putin? Well, you could have said the same thing about how do we stop the West going into Iraq. In international politics, it's never as simple as we in the media tend to present. And I actually think that Putin does have some sense of legitimacy in the eyes of his own people.
Well, so where do you get the information that 78% of the people in Ukraine roughly would as supporting Russia.
Yeah, well,
From what I can see, they're not.
I've done some research into the actual percentage. I employ somebody from Russia, and she's given me some information about this. Could be wrong, but I don't think she's lying to me. Some of those bits, like regions, if you like, some of the areas that Putin says he's defending have roughly 4 in 5 people who are Russian-leaning. They're actually Russian people. Now, this isn't unusual. I mean, you go to Scotland, most people are Scottish. It's the same kind of thing, so it's not like a sinister statement. But the core issue here, and I'm interested to know what you think about this, the core issue here is, have we provoked this? Is Putin 100% wrong, or do we have to take some responsibility? And I think that we do need to take some responsibility for this.
I think we might be looking in the wrong direction. I think while we're all focused on Russia as the great global threat, we're forgetting about China. And what this situation is going to create is China becoming the new superpower. Because if the Western world is putting sanctions on Russia, that means Russia is going to be reliant on China for economic support, which means the West is going to be leaning on China to put pressure on Russia. Russia is going to become the gatekeeper. China is going to become the gatekeeper in this new situation.
To be honest with you, I think I, in a way, can see that, because I can see how the Chinese did abstain in that vote. And if you look at the whole overall situation, I mean, China have been going across parts of Africa, buying lots of swathes of land and businesses and coming up with loads of global ideas. We ourselves are in bed with China in respect to all the products and services and our iPhones.
And they're growing a world empire.
We've all got one.
They're investing in Africa, in the Caribbean, they're taking over states.
Everything.
They're becoming a new world empire.
And Russia look to China, and they are, as you saw, they're together in this. So I think, in a sense, the West and our way of life, would you say it's in trouble?
I think it very much is in trouble, because the Western way of life, we've forgotten what it means. We're busy out here painting rainbows on everything. We've forgotten what it means to stick up for our values. So the East is laughing at us.
Well, and to be honest, looking at some of their systems, and I'm looking at the rainbows and the nonsense that we're, all this gender ID, 76 different, the last time I counted it was 76, half of them made up, words that don't really exist, and actually if you put them in a sentence like they, it's grammatically incorrect. I mean, what are we doing to ourselves?
Just this week, MI5 and MI6 have released information that we need to be careful on people's pronouns. Our spy agencies are telling us about pronouns. That's how lost we are.
Yeah, it's frightening. I mean, it really is. Yet all around us, the rest of the world is in peril, especially in Ukraine. Now, this show is nothing without you and your views, so let's welcome one of our great British voices, and this is your opportunity to be on the show and tell me what you think about the topics that we're discussing. So Julie Ford is from Bedfordshire. Julie, talk to me then. What do you think? How do we stop Putin? Have you got any ideas?
I think, from my point of view, Nana, I don't know if we can stop him. I would like to see there's a logical explanation for how we can move forward with this, but I genuinely don't think there is. You need a logical thinker to be able to negotiate with him and come to some kind of negotiations, but I think he's so focused on the outcome that he wants that even if like Boris Johnson has said earlier today, the Russian people do protest against him. Will that really make any difference? Will he listen to his own people? Already, as the Premier, he's surrounding himself with yes men. He's surrounding himself with people who are frightened of any ramifications of disagreeing with him or challenging him. So at the moment, he's quite protected in the outcomes that he wants, and he can get them. I genuinely don't see how any of the sanctions that we put in place will stop the war, will stop Putin doing what he's doing. Airstrikes, the no-fly zone for the airstrikes, I think that's a great idea. But as your panel has already said, he's in bed with China, really, and we are just going to end up moving this across rather than actually stopping the war altogether.
Julie, thank you very much for that very insightful view. Let's see what my panel make of what Julie said. I'm afraid I'm inclined to agree with her. He has a goal and he wants to get to it, and I don't see him stopping.
Julie actually probably speaks in a way that the Russian population would agree as well. Back to this question, how do we stop Putin? Is that what we're supposed to be doing? In my world, and maybe this makes me idealistic, though I've got a vested interest in hating the Russians for what they did to my family, but in my world, we should be saying, how do we actually negotiate the international politics here? Putin has a point. Whether we like it or not, he has a point. about NATO, which is a fundamentally Western-orientated defence system with political ambitions, coming right up next to the border of Russia, as it does for Latvia.
But NATO are entitled to do that if the countries of NATO, who are part of NATO, want their support and assistance, and that's what NATO is supposedly meant to be, isn't it? It's supposed to be there's about 30 countries. They're supposed to support each other. They're a peacekeeping force, and that's what their role is. And those countries joined voluntarily. Nobody forced them to do it, and they're supposed to contribute towards it, which many don't. Or contribute the right amount.
Yes, to 90% of what you're saying. And I'm sorry I'm talking a lot, but I'm really very involved in this personally. But no to the fact that we have the right to be in the Ukraine as NATO.
Well, not...
Because part of the promise was that we wouldn't do that. The West agreed, I'm slightly oversimplifying it, but essentially the West agreed we would not put NATO into the Ukraine or the other way around. And Putin's saying, don't do this. I'm going to respond. Don't do this. I'm going to respond. And he's responded.
Well, Ukraine signed the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons treaty, didn't they? And that came with them. And there were 4 big countries, I think, that joined with that. And the agreement was that we would protect them and look after them should anything like this be happening. So it's a bit of a difficult place to be now because they've agreed with this. I mean, I think it was the Budapest Memorandum that was all part of it. And so now what?
But it's not complex. Ukraine should have been a buffer state, not like the Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia states. They're clearly part of, Estonia's the one I know best, quite clearly part of NATO. There's a place in Estonia called Narva where the Russian troops can actually see the NATO troops. There's just a river between them. And Putin and his predecessors put up with all of that. But Ukraine's too much. We're not talking about a tiny little state
it's huge, 40 million is
44 million people there, many of whom actually are comfortable with what's happening here. We can't pretend that all 44 million people are unhappy with this. And that's why it's complex. We see the situation through a Western filter. I've been watching the news almost continuously here and also in Bulgaria. And what I see is a much more nuanced situation than the way that the West is allowing us to see this.
I hear you there. I mean, there were talks of stopping RT, the Russian TV channel, which I don't think is really
a terrible mistake. We have to see what RT is saying because that's the voice of the Russian people,
and also,
Russian state.
And also, as you said, this media filter, we've seen it being done. I mean, you saw them putting a picture of Boris Johnson at a Zoom party, which was breaking news, and it turns out it was a Zoom party. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So we've seen how stories can be distorted. And that is the worry, isn't it? That we're hearing it's propaganda on our side. You know, we're trying to stop theirs, but what about what we're hearing?
And I'm absolutely looking at this through a Western lens, and I'm seeing where do we go from here? Germany is entirely compromised because they're importing so much of their energy from Russia. So what do? We avoid that. We open the coal mines, we get fracking. The reason we're not fracking is because of Russian propaganda in this country. Lots of people are saying it wasn't safe. There might be minor earthquakes. No, it's very safe. It's been proven that way. So we should be doing that. So become self-reliant and don't go down the route that Germany's gone. And now the EU is compromised because of Germany. So what can we do to strengthen our nation? Invest in our military, invest in our energy and fuel, and focus on Britain.
Yeah, and learn from this as well. Stop selling off the things that we need. British steel, why would you sell that? You need to make ships. You've got an industry, you need to build buildings. Why would you rely on that from somewhere else abroad? Water, why would you sell this off and allow others to take control of that?
And guess what? The Russian military isn't solar powered. The Russian economy is not green energy powered.
No.
We have made some catastrophic strategic mistakes. And I think one of them was ignoring the warning signs that Putin gave us. Whether you love him or you hate him, he did tell us he was going to do this.
Yeah.
And now we have to accept some responsibility.
And now we're transfixed with net zero.
Which,
to be honest, if they're saying the planet's going to, we're going to do this to ourselves in how many, 50 years, well, if we carry on with this nuclear thing, it'll be a lot shorter than that. So we need to start thinking properly.
Richard Tice said there's £1 trillion worth of gas under our feet. We wouldn't be so beholden to the Russians if we actually took it up from under our own ground.
I wish we'd get on with it. And they're talking about levelling up. They could level up by opening the coal mines and the north would be considerably richer than London. Right, so let's see what you're thinking as well, because today I'm asking, how can we stop Putin? And lots of you have been getting in touch with your views. Lily says, it doesn't matter. It's not our war. And as sad as it is, we shouldn't get involved. And there's a lot of people with that view, to be fair. Lily. Lawrence says, get Harry and Meghan to condemn Putin's actions. I'm sure they'll scare him into submission. I think they already have, actually. I think you'll find they have just already done that, probably. Barry says, tougher sanctions are what we need. Banning SWIFT payments in Russia will cripple its economy. Potentially, but then there's the CIPS, which is the Chinese system. They're probably already on that. Chris says, Putin responds to strength and weakness. And at the moment, the EU and the USA are looking extremely weak. Yeah, for sure. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. After the break, the Queen still has COVID, but how's she coping with the illness? We'll get the latest with royal expert Charles Ray in our weekly Royal Roundup. Don't go anywhere. I'll see you in a few moments' time.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
So it's fast approaching 5 minutes to 5 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. If you've just joined me, welcome on board. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, there's always something going on in the royal household, and this week has been no different. So each Saturday, I always like to give you a bit of a royal rundown. Well, who better to delve into all of that with Charles Ray? He joins me now. Charles, thank you for joining me. Really good to talk to you. Now, of course, there's so many things happening in the world, but the Queen, at the head of this wonderful country, she has COVID. We know that. Can you give us an update on her condition?
Yes, it was only a week ago, last Sunday, that we heard that the Queen had got COVID, and we've had a couple of anxiety attacks, if you like, because she's cancelled a couple of virtual meetings that she was due to have because she's still got a croaky voice. Now, we're approaching a week on, and everyone is saying at the palace that, yes, she's got flu-like symptoms, but that's all she's suffering from. Now, we'll find out a lot more next week, because on Wednesday she's due to host a diplomatic reception at Windsor Castle. Now, this is a big reception. It's about 1,000 odd people, ambassadors and their staff. I don't expect the Russians will be there, though. and she is expected to be there, and that's could be quite a taxing event because she's expected to be standing around for an hour or so, meeting and greeting. But the plan is perhaps maybe she just makes a fleeting appearance and she leaves the grip and grinning duties to Charles and Camilla and William and Catherine. And then, of course, on the 14th, she's at Westminster Abbey for a Commonwealth service. And then a few days after that, March the 29th, it's the big one where she's at the memorial service for her late husband.
You think that perhaps she should rest a bit more, I think. I don't think she should do all those things. Maybe the memorial service, yes, for her late husband, but she should just rest, really, because a lot of people suffer quite considerably after COVID, whether you're in your 90s or not. It's exhausting.
I don't think her doctors would advise her. They can't order her. They would advise her maybe not to go to these events. And I think she will only not go to those events if she's not feeling up to it. If she's feeling fine, this is a woman who puts duty above everything else, and she will attend these events if she possibly can.
She's a brilliant woman, isn't she? Now, we'll move on to the Cambridges then, and the Sussexes. They're showing solidarity with Ukraine.
Yeah, it's interesting that when Harry and Meghan did this at the beginning, I think a few days ago, there was quite a bit of condemnation on social media, and you've just put one lady tweeted about, Putin must be shaking in his boots because Harry and Meghan made the comment. And now William and Catherine have done exactly the same thing today, and they've showed their solidarity with the Ukraine, including the Ukrainian flag in their tweet, and that they stand with the president and all the Ukrainian people. So yes, it's quite interesting. It's also interesting that we've got senior members of the royal family who are actually getting involved in quite a serious political matter. It's interesting, and I think it's a good thing to see, because lots of people are always complaining about the royal family, or they never really comment on, these sort of world events. But here we have the younger members of the family are commenting and, are doing things.
I'm glad they're commenting, but I think the reason why the Sussexes didn't get such a great response is because probably not many people like them as much. What about William and Kate then? They don't, do they? Now, William and Kate, what about them? Because they're going to Twickenham today, aren't they?
They are. Now this is a big family rift. This afternoon is up for grabs. We've got William, who is patron of the Welsh Rugby Union, and they're taking on England. And the new patron of the English Rugby Union is none other than Catherine herself. So they'll be in the stands supporting their sides. And whoever wins, that should be an interesting tea time talk this afternoon. I wish I could be a fly on the wall for that one. So it's going to be, hopefully a good match. I've just seen my Scotland just lose against France, and I hope Wales beat England. Sorry about that.
It'll be a great match. Charles, thank you so much for joining us. That's Charles Ray. He's the former royal correspondent to The Sun. You're watching me, Nana Akua, on GB News. More to come in the next hour. So it's just coming up to 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. So for this next hour, my panel will be joining me and we'll be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 5 o'clock. I'm Miranda Shunker in the GB newsroom. Logistical problems and strong resistance are thought to be slowing Russia's advance into Ukraine. That's according to officials at the UK's Ministry of Defence, who believe the capture of Kiev's remains Russia's primary military objective. Gunfire and explosions have been heard throughout the capital, and fighting has broken out on the streets. The mayor of Kiev has imposed a curfew from tonight until Monday morning, and citizens are being warned to seek shelter. In an address to the nation, President Zelensky urged the Russian people to tell Moscow to back down.
I want absolutely everyone in Russia to hear me. Thousands of victims, hundreds of prisoners who simply can't understand why they were sent to Ukraine to die, to kill others. The sooner you tell your government the war must be stopped immediately, the more of your people will be kept alive. We can see that there are demonstrations of your citizens who are against the war. We need to end this war. We can live in peace, in global peace, in human peace.
Well, the UN Refugee Agency says more than 120,000 Ukrainians have left the country since Russia began its invasion. The aid agency is also warning that fuel, cash and medical supplies are running low in parts of the country, which could drive up to 5 million people to flee abroad. Mark Kovalenko is with thousands of other Ukrainians waiting to cross into Poland. He says he must leave because no one will come to help.
I want to survive because I have a family in Europe. So right now in Ukraine is a dangerous place because Russian forces come from more, and every day is strange time. USA and NATO don't help us, so we don't have any chosen. We must do this something for survival.
Well, Labour MP Stephen Kinnock told GB News that if Russia attacks a NATO member country, it would amount to an attack on all of NATO.
So much as considered putting a single military boot on the ground into any of those NATO countries, then the consequences for him will be swift and they will be catastrophic. And that is what I think we have to make absolutely clear to him now, whilst doing everything we can to arm the resistance in Ukraine so that we stand with our friends and partners and allies against this tyrant and gangster that Mr. Putin really is.
Well, back here, protests in support of Ukraine have been taking place in London, Edinburgh and Manchester. Eggs have been thrown at the Russian embassy in London, which is in touch with the British police after receiving phone threats. GB News' Inaya Falarin Iman was at the London protest.
We've heard people saying Putin out, we've heard stop the war. We've also heard a lot of people actually having placards when it's putting pressure on the international community to actually remove Russia from the SWIFT banking system. That is an international banking system that enables money to move around internationally quite easily, and I think that increasingly people are putting pressure on that to be one of the ways in which diplomatically people go further.
The UK, US, Canada and the European Union have announced plans to impose personal sanctions on President Vladimir Putin and his Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. It comes as Russia vetoed a United Nations motion calling on Moscow to withdraw its troops. China, India and the United Arab Emirates abstained from the vote. The Home Secretary has cancelled the visas of the Belarusian men's basketball team who are due to play in Newcastle tomorrow night. Priti Patel tweeted, the UK will not welcome the national sports teams of those countries who are complicit in Putin's unprovoked and illegal invasion of Ukraine. Well, in other news, the Education Secretary Nadeem Zadawi has told GB News schools won't be allowed to close ever again.
I am determined that we continue to live with this virus. We'll have other variants, I'm certain of it, whether one in the summer and one in the autumn. But never again will we ask children to be out of school.
And footballer Christian Eriksen has made his return to the pitch for the first time since collapsing with a cardiac arrest at last year's Euro 2020. The Danish midfielder, fitted with a heart-starting device, joined the London club as a free agent in January. Both sets of fans at the Brentford Stadium clapped him as he came on as a substitute in the 51st minute, with also several players joining in. Well, this is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now let's get straight back to Nana Akua.
Company at all.
So good afternoon. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. Now, this show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today, it's former Liberal Democrat MP Lembit Opik and Conservative commentator Calvin Robertson. Now, still to come in the Great British Debate this hour, we'll be looking at how history is taught in our schools and whether the curriculum needs an overhaul to increase diversity. Plus, my difficult conversation today is all about the unfolding crisis in Ukraine. I'll be speaking to Anna Vitik, a Ukrainian woman now living in the UK, and talking to her about whether the West is doing enough to support her home country. And we'll test my panellists' knowledge of this week's news in my quick-fire quiz. All of that on the way. You can get in touch, email gbviews@gbnews.uk or send me a tweet at gbnews. So it's now time for difficult conversations. And as battles continue to rage in Ukraine, as the Russian invasion moves closer to the heart of the capital, Kiev, Western nations have announced plans to impose rare personal sanctions on President Vladimir Putin and his foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, on top of earlier sanctions, which included freezing assets from Russian banks. But many say that the response from countries like the UK doesn't go far enough. And among them is my next guest. Anna Vitik is a born and bred Ukrainian who moved to the UK in 2004. And many of Anna's family members are still in Ukraine. And she's been protesting at Downing Street in recent days, calling on the West to do more to support her country. And I'm delighted to say that Anna Vitik joins me now in the studio. So Anna, first of all, I mean, thank you so much for coming in, but you must be horrified seeing what's happening.
Thank you for inviting me over here. Devastating, and it's horrified. It's not a big word enough to say how we feel. It's not a crisis as you describe it. That's the beginning of World War III, if you don't realize it on this side of the world. They've taken the peaceful country, they didn't even declare the war. While people were sleeping, they start bombing. Nobody in real world, in being a human being, would ever do that. And we, as a European country, we need all the protection, and we need NATO to get involved and close the sky so we don't get bombed. You know, at least when we have people invading our homeland on the ground, we can fight. But if somebody is bombing us and we have no protection, we can't protect ourselves, and you know, we cause it more ruins, more death. Children are being born in the underground stations. There is no supply of food. Some people are like stuck in their places, and it's a lot of death. It's a lot of devastation. This is what we have at the moment. And you know, I don't think so we can reach any peaceful agreement with Russia because, as previously in the 19th century was told, that the agreement written with Russia is not even worth the paper it's written on. As you can see, the Budapest Agreement that we have, you know, back in 1994, Ukraine had enough of nuclear power, so they would have been a nation after US and Russia. They would be the third nation in the world that would have so many nuclear weapons. So I think if we would be in the same position, nobody would ever attack us.
Well, of course, they had a third of Russia's nuclear arsenal based in Ukraine. But I did read that the issue was with their nuclear weapons, and I hear what you're saying is that they could have only have hit the east of Russia, which was the issue with them, that they wouldn't, and potentially now they wouldn't be capable, and they would probably be defunct. But I see the point that if there were nuclear weapons, this probably wouldn't be happening at all. And
they wouldn't be happening, or they would be afraid to go there. So Ukraine signed the agreement, and Ukraine, in that agreement, they have a protection from US and protection from UK and protection from Russia. So that agreement means there will be no war and will be no action. And Russia just crossed everything over. UK is observing, US is observing, the rest of the world is just observing.
And they're sort of talking about NATO. They're saying that, well, because they're part of NATO, they can't really take part, but yet they did sign this treaty.
Yes.
It was the non-proliferation nuclear weapons treaty that they signed, yes. Yeah, it's and for you personally then, because your story is that you were born in Ukraine, so you must know how beautiful it is, and you know what's your memories of living in Ukraine? I
mean, I've been living in Ukraine until I was 18, and then I moved to London. You know, I have a business here, I have a business there, I have a company over here, I have a company over there, I have my entire family living in Ukraine. My husband lives in London. My mum, my dad, my brother, my grandma, my nieces and nephews and the rest of my family, everyone lives in Lviv and outside of Lviv and all the other cities in Ukraine. They're very peaceful people, you know, they're getting over their life. You know, they're not in a position to go somewhere to be a refugee. So they're going to fight till the last, you know, Ukrainian person is standing to protect Ukraine. I mean, Ukraine is an amazing country, and we deserve better. We deserve peace, and we deserve people helping us. Because, you know, since we decided that we don't need any nuclear weapons, we need protection, we just don't need to be, the world doesn't need to be just concerned, we need real actions. So there are funds, you can transfer money to support Ukrainian troops. There are other funds you can transfer money to send some medical aids. And also, we need NATO to get involved. There are no two ways about it.
But the threat, though, and I think those members of NATO are concerned that NATO is one unit, so, I mean, Putin would have trouble to try and sort of pick countries off individually if that's what we're concerned about. But NATO was ultimately a peacekeeping force, so it wasn't really meant to be involved in conflict in this way. It's more a protective force, which is how it works. But there are threats that if NATO get involved, Vladimir Putin is saying that he will escalate things. Yeah, but then things are already bad, you know, because at the beginning when he was threatening, we thought, okay, it will happen on the eastern part because, you know, they went there a few times, although like the rest of the world saying it's a crisis. Not a crisis, it's full-on war from 2014. That's what we experienced. Lots of my family, they went to the eastern part to protect Ukrainian borders. So everyone been involved in that fight, as you call it, but it's not fight, it's actual war. So say, you know, if the things progress, and they progressed more. They went to Kiev, they went to Odessa, they went to Sumy, they went to Western Ukraine. I mean, they're everywhere. So they're just bombing citizens, you know, and like the rest of the world is just observing and is concerned. But judging, you know, by this Budapest memorandum, UK and US needs to protect Ukraine. They signed the treaty, they were part
just
of it.
Sending, you know, weapons, you know, and hoping that nothing will happen, it just doesn't work. We need more involvement. I think, and I think what it is I can imagine people in the UK government and the centre are also frightened of Putin by the looks of everybody is fearful of this man. What we were talking earlier, and one of the MPs, Lembit Opik, he said that a lot of Ukrainians actually want to be part of Russia. In any case, is that a general vibe of the people? No, that's not a general vibe. That's not a general vibe. I absolutely disagree. So when the first war happened in 2014, when, you know, Putin was trying to take Donbass and everything else, like on the eastern part and Luhansk and all the other small villages around there. So they all went in there and they, you know, start fighting with the normal people. And normal people all say, oh, we love Russia. You know what the guy replied to him? I'm not sure if I can swear on it. No swearing. Said, bugger off, kind of, to the guy. Like, we don't need you. So they only took their businesses, they took their life. All they want to invade you, take your life, take your business, take your money. That's it. What's the relationship with the Russian people then? Because the Ukrainian and Russian... Yeah. I mean, you were one big country at one point, of course, and then... we were never one big country. We used to be a part of the USSR, yes. Yeah, Soviet Union. Part of the USSR, and I think it's in 1991, I think it is, on 1st of December, when Ukraine initially sort of got its independence. On the 8th, it was... Reclaim independence. Yeah. So, as what is the relationship like with the Russian people then? Because I would have thought that they would have some friendly relationship, but is that not what I... No, I would say, you know, there are normal people in Russia, there are normal people in Ukraine, and people who respond to things in a, how would I say, an understanding way. Like, people did business, you know, Ukraine had business with Russia, Russia had business with Ukraine, we had relationship. But now, at this crisis, what is happening, I don't think so any normal human being would do business with Russia. I've been contacted because what I do in UK, I bring timber from Latvia and from all the other countries to UK. So I've been contacted on LinkedIn by a Russian company saying, I'm based in St. Petersburg, I can give you this, I can bring timber, I can bring plywood. You know what I replied to that guy? Thank you very much for your message, but don't deal with the country who is aggressor and who is fighting my native country. It's just an absolute disgrace. It is disgrace. I can't even quantify how someone would think that it's okay to actually drop a bomb on someone, but then for no real reason apart from the fact that you want a land grab, you want to take the land, but yet what are you going to do with it? The people on the land are not going to comply with you and go along with it. You're going to have to literally exterminate the whole thing to start again, and it seems a bit ridiculous. What would you like to see happen? What would you like to see? Because you've mentioned about NATO and all those kind of things. But if we don't get involved in that way, is there anything else that
the UK and other countries can do?
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a massive life loss. It's going to be a massive humanitarian crisis. We would need to have a lot of help, and we would need to have a lot of emergency. You know, say, when you're fighting with somebody, there are some wounds, you know, so some medical access is only when you can get from the hospital, some aids, you know, like Salox, the stuff when you put into wounds, so, you know, it doesn't require surgical assistance. That's what we need. We need medical help, we need peace, and then, you know, we need somebody to arrange it, UK government, to bring medical aid and to bring it to Ukrainian border and somehow to deliver to Ukraine. Because we have a lot of volunteers working on the other side, because this is what I'm dealing with at the moment. We are gathering some things from UK, buying it privately and just sending it over there. And then I'm arranging volunteers to meet Polish or Slovakian people on the border and just bring medical aid to Ukraine. Yeah. And just send it to the other hospitals because they're in need. Imagine how many young children, you know, they're born there, they have no access to food, they have no basic food, even to Pampers, nothing.
No diapers, no nappies.
No diapers, no nappies, yes.
It's heartbreaking, isn't it? And I can't really see this ending in you know, quickly.
No, it won't end quickly. I think it's going to be a few different scenarios. The scenario number one, Ukraine won't surrender, that's for sure. We will fight till the end, you know, until we have power and until we have weapons, we're going to fight. And then I don't think so that Putin will surrender either. No. So it's either we're winning and we have Ukraine, or we are losing and we have the World War III. This is how it's going to happen. Because, you know, they've taken nuclear power station.
Well, they went through Chernobyl, didn't
yes.
they, to get there? So that's, you know, it's beyond me. And how are you coping? Because obviously your family are there. I mean, you're, you know, on a real level.
I don't think so. I had any sleep in the recent couple of days. You know, even I'm not allowed to walk so far because of my food and everything. But I still go to the protests. And I'm still trying to get involved. I'm still, you know, bombarding social media because they're spreading too many of fake news, especially, you know, Russia Today. And all the, you know, artists, like, say, all the singers, they used to come to Ukraine, gather all the massive, you know, concerts, you know, they have a lot of supporters. You know what they put in the news? That Ukraine is invading Russia. And they have so many followers, so we need to fight back. We need to tell the world what is really happening. This is what I'm doing, and I'm trying to get myself involved with the medical aid, because the next thing, East needs a lot of aid, and then Kiev needs a lot of help as well. So we're trying to arrange this, so I'm trying to get, you know, volunteers together. And to be honest, I'm at this stage in life that I would want to go by the Polish border and just help out as much as I can.
And are you in contact with your family members?
Yes, I am.
Speak to them?
Yes, luckily, you know, the internet is working, so, you know, they can send me a message every now and again. So when I go to sleep, I'll try to go to sleep every half an hour. I'm up, I'm reading news, and I'm sending them messages. This is what I'm doing. My brother, he's got 3 kids, underage kids. The youngest one is 3. That's a little boy. Then another girl is 7. Then another one is 10, and his wife. So he had to take his wife and 3 kids to Polish border, and then my other family who live in Poland, they had to collect 3 kids and wife to take it to a safer place. My brother, he's exempt from army because he got eyesight problem. He can't see partially on one eye, and the other eye is really kind of, he's partially blind kind of by the things. And then he's exempt from army, and plus he got 3 kids, so he could, by law, leave Ukraine. We choose not to. So he left his wife and his 3 kids in Poland, and he went back, and he's staying in Lviv in Ukraine.
And he's staying to fight?
Yes. There is no two ways about it. And, you know, when the people say, because it's all politics, art is not politics, everything is politics right now. It's either you take this position or you're with Putin. There are no two ways about it.
Well, I mean, I hope this ends quickly. It needs to stop. It really does. I don't know what the solutions can be in every way, but what I know is that it does need to stop.
The solution is to close the sky so we don't get bombarded. This is number 1 priority. Yeah. The second solution is just to send, you know, all the medical aid, send more weapons, and and start collecting international people, like people who live outside of Ukraine and people who are not Ukrainian and who are willing to go and fight.
Yeah.
This is what we need to do.
If we can close the skies, that will really
Yeah, that Putin is sending people from Chechnya. Do you have an idea what it's all about? Chechnya, it's one of these countries where they will come in, they'll cut your throat and eat you alive. And they wouldn't care if you are old, if you're a kid. They're just animals.
But not everyone's the same, even as you said that. So there may be some that would do that, but not all the...
No, Kadyrov and his troops, they're being sent there.
Well, maybe, look, I respect that, but we have to be careful if we're saying things like that, because whilst there may be an element of truth in that, we have to be careful, because not all the people from Chechnya are like that.
No, I'm not saying they're all. The people he's sending there, he's sending Kadyrov and his troops.
Yeah, well, if it's troops and we know battle is very, very brutal. Anna, listen, I really hope and pray for your family and for you as well, and I hope that they stop this nonsense war. I think it's ridiculous. And it's, we in the West, where we are not touched by it, in direct contact with it, need to start acting and doing something to support. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For coming to talk to me, and,
I appreciate all your time, and I appreciate that the world needs to know what's really happening, and we're going to fight as much as we can until the last Ukrainian is standing alive.
Well, Anna, your family and everything, I wish them safety, and I wish them all the best. Thank you so much for talking to me. Thank you very much. That's Anna Vichik. She's a Ukrainian living here in the UK. That, of course, was my difficult conversation. Now, on the way, we'll be talking about our Great British Debate in this hour. We're looking at the history and history sessions and the curriculum in the school, and does it need to be overhauled? But first, let's take a short break.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
So good afternoon. If you just joined me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio, and it's time for our Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, should our history curriculum be overhauled? The government is considering an overhaul of the history curriculum to make it more diverse by tackling issues like migration and cultural change and reducing the repetition of lessons about things like the Tudors and the Second World War. So I'm joined now by Lord Rafe Lucas, Editor-in-Chief of the Good Schools Guide and a Conservative peer. Thank you for joining me. So I'll just get your views on the current curriculum then. What do you think of it in terms of the history? Is it enough? Is it inclusive enough?
No, it's way away from where it should be. I mean, even in its coverage of conventional history, it's far too narrow. History ought to be about us all having a common understanding of who we are and how we got here, how the world works and how people work. That needs a big narrative, a shared understanding, and it certainly needs to include people who came here recently, as well as people who have been here for the last 1,000 years. It is ridiculous that we don't have a shared understanding of your history in the way that we have a shared understanding of the history that my ancestors lived through. It is a divisive curriculum, and we need to do something to make it a much more uniting curriculum.
Well, I was going to say to you, actually, I'm the thoroughbred, Rafe, because we all started off as black, as far as I'm concerned. And I'd actually like to hear history starting from there, which is everybody's history, I think. So I think that's one of the problems is, as you said,
yes,
your history, but then it's our history, because we are all one, and actually we are all one from the same thing, ultimately, at the beginning. And I would like to see history start at the beginning of sort of mankind and pick out various
absolutely
bits in the process.
There's some really good understandings of where we came from and how we all migrated now.
Exactly. Then we'd be more united instead of thinking that we're one different race and we're all the same one. Do you think that... So in your eyes, then, if you were to change the curriculum, and obviously it's the Tudors and all that sort of thing, what would you see that could really be useful that we could have in there in terms of history? And what more things would you have liked to have been taught?
I think the important bit of curriculum is the stuff we can relate to, because the societies are not too different from us. So the last 300 years or so, I think we need to teach what happened in those times clearly and honestly. I mean, the fact that we wouldn't choose to live that way now and we wouldn't take the same decisions needs to be something we can accept. We shouldn't avoid bits of history because we're uncomfortable about what our forebears did. What we need to do is see ourselves as having a shared existence, that your history is my history, and that I should be as proud of that as I am looking back at what my ancestors did. So it's
interesting you say that. So do you think then, because there's a lot of this removing links to slavery and stuff like that going about, there's a lot of it knocking about, people thinking they can delete history or change it or not mention it. Do you think that we now need to be sort of more, in a sense, proud of our history, but also acknowledge where we've gone wrong and potentially learning from it rather than brushing it out?
I don't think I'm proud at all that my father's ancestors were slave owners. I congratulate UCL on doing the research and making all clear. It had certainly been airbrushed out of my own realization. I hadn't known that at all. But nor should we be unaware that people have come here out of slavery, that they have the other end of that in their ancestry. But that we are now all together, we're all English, we're all sharing the same country, and over something like Ukraine, wishing to face in the same direction in the face of a monstrous threat. So having a shared understanding of who we are and embracing other people's history is a really important part of that.
I wish they'd get on with it as well. I wish they'd get on with putting these changes in place, because they keep having talks about talks and then nothing actually happens and we carry on the same bit. Well, Lord Rafe Lucas, thank you so much for joining me. It's really good to talk to you. That's
pleasure to talk to you.
Rafe Lucas. He's the editor-in-chief of the Good Schools Guide and a Conservative peer. Right, let's have a look at what you've been saying. Patrick says, yes, I was taught nothing in the 70s, 80s about imperialism, about both sides of our history. Britain was the saviour of the world. Nothing about the horrors that were perpetuated. Mike says no, because you can't change history no matter how much you wish to whitewash it. Lee says no, we should only be teaching British history and no history from anywhere else. Really? Well, that's I guess that's your view, and thank you for sharing. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Still to come, we're going to be continuing with our Great British Debate, and I'm asking, should our history curriculum be overhauled? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, former Liberal Democrat MP Lembit Apik, and also Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Thank you. It's 5:31. I'm Miranda Shunker in the GB newsroom. Sir Keir Starmer has called for the expulsion of Russia's ambassador to the UK following Ukraine's invasion. Speaking during a visit to Birmingham, the Labour leader said the government should order Andrei Kelin to leave the country immediately. He also says Britain should be prepared to take in Ukrainian refugees fleeing the Russian invasion. The British Ministry of Defence says Russia's advance into Ukraine has temporarily slowed, likely to be caused by logistical problems and strong resistance. Officials say the capture of Kiev remains Russia's primary military objective. Gunfire and explosions have been heard throughout the capital, and citizens are being warned to seek shelter. The UN Refugee Agency says more than 120,000 Ukrainians have now left the country since Russia began its invasion. The aid agency is also warning that fuel, cash and medical supplies are running low in parts of the country, which could drive up to 5 million people to flee abroad. And the UK, US, Canada and the European Union have announced plans to impose personal sanctions on President Vladimir Putin and his Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. It comes as Russia vetoed a United Nations motion calling on Moscow to withdraw its troops. China, India and the United Arab Emirates abstained from the vote. In Manchester, hundreds gathered in Piccadilly Gardens for a Stand for Ukraine rally. Meanwhile, in London, eggs have been thrown at the Russian embassy during pro-Ukrainian protests. And the Home Secretary has cancelled the visas of the Belarusian men's basketball team who are due to play in Newcastle tomorrow night. Priti Patel tweeted, the UK will not welcome the national sports teams of those countries who are complicit in Putin's unprovoked and illegal invasion of Ukraine. Well, on TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. We'll be straight back to Nana Akua after the break. Stay with us.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon. It's just gone 35 minutes after 5 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. So we return to our great British debate this hour. The government is considering an overhaul of the history curriculum to make it more diverse by tackling issues like migration and cultural change. So I'm asking, should our history curriculum be overhauled? Let's see what my panel make of that. Lembit Opik and Calvin Robinson. And as ever, the show's nothing without you, so keep your thoughts coming in and your views. I'm going to start with you, Calvin, because... yeah, so what did you make of what...
Go for it.
What do you think of what Rafe said? Because the Good Schools Guide...
First of all, well, OK, so what Lord Lucas said was wrong. This is a good example of people that are well-meaning that misunderstand what we're doing in the curriculum. In the curriculum, in history, we're teaching British history, European history and world history. We're teaching the history that has helped shape this nation. We're not teaching white history versus black history. And for him to suggest that we need to teach your history as well as his history, what does he mean by your? And I find that quite problematic, because if someone said that to me, I'd say my history is the same as your history.
Yeah, well, that's what I pointed
British
out to him in a polite manner.
But people say, oh, we avoid talking about the slave trade, we avoid talking about colonialism. No, we don't avoid talking about colonialism at all. If people look at the history curriculum that Michael Gove put in place in 2014,
all it is, isn't it?
They'll find it's broad, it's balanced, it touches on going back to ancient Egypt all the way to present day, World War I, World War II, Indian immigration, African immigration, Caribbean. It touches on all of these subjects, probably more than it should. In fact, if anything, we talk too much about the negative parts of the British Empire and not enough about the positives. We don't spend as much time talking about spreading hospitals and parliamentary democracy around the world, building railways. We don't talk about all the good things because we're afraid to, or our teachers are afraid to. And for people that say, you know, quite a few people say, I wasn't taught that when I was at school, or we're not teaching enough black history and this and that. I say, I've actually done some research into what is being taught. So first of all, people that say that, do you remember what you were taught at school? And maybe you weren't taught it, but maybe you were taught it and you don't remember it. Maybe you were taught it poorly, and therefore you don't remember it. But first of all, let's look at what's being taught right now. And I've looked into the history curriculum, what's on it, and it does cover all of these topics. So for anyone saying that we need to teach more of this, they're not looking at what's being taught right now, and they're trying to remember anecdotally what they were taught, and that's the wrong approach to it.
But don't think we need to go a little bit further back there, because he said maybe 300 years. Wouldn't you? Because where I learnt about the evolution of man, it began in biology, which I think to me should be history. And I would have started it there and just taken some salient points in between that and then brought us up to current day quite quickly. But what do you think?
Two thoughts. First of all, I'm generally aligned to what you're saying. I don't think we're doing this badly in this country. By and large, if you pay attention to the teacher, you can get an idea about what's happened in the past. But here are the two things I've learned in my life. Winners write the history. That's the first thing. So whoever wins a war tends to write the history of the war. And secondly, everything has got bias.
Propaganda.
How many people in this country know anything about Chinese history? We don't teach about the Opium Wars. That probably is a phrase that many of your viewers haven't even heard. So you can't avoid having a filter. What we can do, though, is encourage inquiring minds. And inquiring minds can challenge and debate. If you could film what Calvin and I talk about in the green room there, we're arguing a lot of the time, but we're exploring. That's what history's about. And there's a great phrase, you've both heard it, people who ignore the lessons of history are doomed to relive them. That's what we're trying to stop. That's what, by the way, what's happening in Ukraine to an extent now. If we just remember that war doesn't tend to fix things, it makes things worse, then if we can actually teach people to understand that, then we've made progress. No one individual event is significant here, but when you put it together, then you understand the whole story. My education was kind of paid for by cigarettes. H.H. Wills built Bristol University, more or less. So I understand that. But I still had a great education there. It's not about saying it's terrible that Bristol University exists. It's saying context. Understand this, and that goes about slavery too.
Well, what would you say to those, some of those big universities that because I asked him about the removal of links to slavery, and he said that he was obviously disgusted with his ancestors for the slave trade, although it wasn't a legitimate trade at the time, right? So it was... no, hang on, let me finish. It was at the time a legitimate trade, so people were doing something that they thought was legitimate, but they didn't do it well and they didn't do it nicely, and in the end we all realised that that's not really the way to go forward. So he said, but he was pleased about the things that we did well. So that's a fair comment, isn't it?
Yeah, but the problem highlighted by that is his white guilt. It's this fact that, oh, I'm afraid of my ancestors, they did terrible things. I think if we look back in anyone's history, we'll find that our ancestors did terrible things because we're all people, we're all fallen, and everyone does terrible things.
So speak for yourself, not my family.
But we're no better today. You know, we're going to war right now. Countries around the world are going to war right now. We are no better today. This idea that, oh, we're so much better, we would not do it in this day and age is arrogance, to be honest, and quite naive. And actually, what we're seeing is people are politicising the curriculum. It's all... you mentioned we don't learn about the open wars. Quite right, because we're obsessed with black history. What is black history?
I don't know.
But why specifically black history? Why not Chinese? Why not Jewish history? Why not any other, Persian history?
Well, because we've got a Black History Month and we need that on the Thursday, on October.
But primarily, you're a Geordie.
But you see, that's the whole thing.
How do you identify, Nana?
How do I identify? As Nana Akua, I don't have a particular
There's only
thing at all.
one.
There's only one. There's only one. Like the Highlander, there's only one.
There can be only one.
Sorry, there can be only one. I'll do it again, sorry.
This as well.
Thanks, man.
No, in a good way. Once you made perfection, you can't improve on it.
Remember the cheeky girls?
Sooner or later, that had to come out. It's part of my history, and I'm proud of it. Teach it at school. Teach it at school.
Very good. Yeah, but my point always with history is that, from what I can remember for history, is that it started at the slave trade. And in a way, the way we kind of tell history kind of pre-programs the children and people who are innocent and ready to take in all this information, that this is how it's been and that's how it began. And that's why I'm saying that I would like to see history being taught, but to explain the beginning of mankind in there at the start, and then you can pick some salient points that you want in the historical context and more globally as well.
As soon as you start teaching anything, you make a judgment about what to include and what to exclude. And therefore, you have to start big and then go small. I grew up in Northern Ireland. There are loads of different interpretations about whether the Fenians were right, whether the Loyalists were right, and so forth. Ultimately, I learned my history of Northern Ireland by meeting terrorists, and they told it through their filter. The one thing I would ask of our country, of our species, is to listen without prejudice. Then you get it right.
And on the obsession with the slave trade, can I just say that there's been more than one slave trade, and slavery has gone on throughout the existence
it's still happening
of
now,
humankind. We're obsessed with the transatlantic slave trade because it affected black people, and black people are very fashionable at the moment, this whole Black Lives Matter movement. But let's not forget the Ottoman Empire were trading in black and white slaves for long before this transatlantic slave trade took place.
That's the thing, and nobody wants to talk about that one. I don't know why. Right, well, this show is nothing without your views, so let's welcome our great British voice, your opportunity to be on the show and tell us what you really think about the topics we're discussing. Neil Charnock is from Gillingham in Kent. Neil, our great British debate this hour, should the curriculum, should it be overhauled?
Good afternoon. I think yes, I would agree that some of it does. A lot of I think our curriculum needs to be overhauled. We are a massively multicultural society these days, and I think if people better understood other people, it may affect things like bullying, where we accept some things. So people accept their food, but we won't accept their clothes, we won't accept their religion. I think it would be a good thing for people to understand people better, have a more understanding of other people, and to tolerate each other more. I think people just kind of almost made themselves their little groups. They go on their own ways and they don't interact with each other. I think it would bring people closer together. I think people understanding all these kind of things, even disabilities, understanding disabilities, I think it will be great for us all. People are just a bit more tolerant of each other and understood a bit more about each other.
Yeah, of course. I mean, Neil, thank you so much for your comments. That's Neil Charnock. He's the CEO of Gillingham Street Angels. Lovely to talk to you. It seems pretty obvious, isn't it, that if you educate people about their surroundings, why they're there, and also where they've come from and how we as mankind have evolved, that they will have a better understanding and probably be better... Sorry, he says no.
No, because there's this obsession. We are now a multicultural society.
No, I don't go with that.
If we teach about all the different cultures, we'll respect them more. And it's not true, because that's based on the premise that all cultures are equal, and all cultures are not equal. And we need to get back to the idea that Britain has a culture, and British culture is a good culture, and we're welcoming for people to come to Britain, but they should take on board our culture. They can bring elements of their own with it, but they should definitely take on board ours, and we're not looking to replace our culture with others, and that is something we forget quite often.
It's quite divisive as well sometimes when you start to talk about culture.
My grandparents and my parents were proud to be welcomed in as refugees because of World War II, because of the Soviet system, which would probably have wiped them out if they'd stayed back in Estonia. And they wanted to be part of the British tradition. I guess one reason I'm so proud of the fact that I served as an MP is because I wanted to give something back to a country which basically saved my family's life and existence. But the point that you're making is really interesting, Calvin. We patronisingly institutionalise certain assumptions. I don't care what colour you are. I'm more interested about the fact why the Magpies are doing so badly in football. Maybe you've got a view about that. And when people say, things like, well, you know, I want your culture to be...
Well, he said it, didn't he? He thought he'd say that.
And it didn't mean it in a mean way.
No, he meant it in a nice way.
Yeah.
I think that's the worst bit about it, that people say this and they don't realise what they've actually said there.
And people like you are welcome here as well.
Sometimes. That's very nice of him, isn't it?
And when it comes down to it, I'm just very grateful for the fact that, as you say, this country is essentially quite tolerant. You get people who are racist and so on, but often it's because they're intimidated by the unfamiliar. If we can teach history in a way which explains your point, we were all born from some lady in Africa from 100,000 years ago. There really isn't very much difference. Anne Widdecombe once said...
They would probably say it, but it could have been a man.
Maybe.
No,
too woke for me. Too woke for me. Somebody once said to me, we are all almost Anne Widdecombe. Somebody said that, because the genetic difference between me and Anne Widdecombe is minuscule. And I think that's true. There's no difference between us. And an alien couldn't tell us apart. No. And what's interesting about it is we live in this tiny little pale blue dot in an ocean of darkness. If we can get people to understand that, just like you're saying, you get back to the basics. We're here for 80 years if we're lucky. And then we understand that war is ridiculous, because we should be celebrating peace and life.
Yeah, war is ridiculous. I second that one. That's ridiculous indeed. Well, thank you very much for your thoughts on that. That's most insightful from my panel. Excellent.
You sound surprised.
Well, I was a little bit, to be honest with you. So today, I've been asking, should history, the curriculum be overhauled? And lots of you have been getting in touch with your views. Jimmy says, teach us all about our true history, both good and bad. Alistair says the truth, the real known historical facts should be taught with no modern interpretation. We all learn to think for ourselves and understand what is truthful and what is false. Ed says, yes, it gets too samey, though, doing all these things all over again. By the age of 16, I was sick of hearing how many wives Henry VIII had. Decapitated, wasn't it? Beheaded, survived, well, he had 6 wives, and then it's 2 divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. Yeah. Sorry, I know that, but that's what they taught us, John. Seriously, I don't know anything else about him. I actually know quite a bit about him, and it was all about the reformation of the
role model, is
monasteries and stuff like that. It needs to be more focused. Sorry, what does that say? John says it needs to be more focused on British success and influence around the world. Nothing much post-World War II. Thank you for that, John. I hear you. I hear you. Well, I mean, thank you for those thoughts. Keep all your thoughts coming. We've got loads still to come, because it's now time for my quick-fire quiz. It's the part of the show where we judge the panel on some of this week's news stories. And, of course, you can play on at home. Please do. I've got former Liberal Democrat MP Lembit Opik and Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson, who are both going to buzz when they know the answer. Right, let's hear Lembit, your buzzer, please. Yes, OK. It is a Liberal Democrat colour as well, and which is either orange or yellow. And Calvin, your buzzer, please. Do it again. Right.
Tory
very
blue.
Good, very good. And his is a Tory blue buzzer. Right, it is indeed. Right, here we go. Question number 1. A woman asked the forum website Reddit for help because her sister wanted to do something with her newborn baby that she doesn't agree with. But what was it? Was it A, naming her baby after a Star Wars character? Was it B, telling the baby its gender, or not telling the baby its gender, sorry, or C, giving the baby a swear word as its name? I think that was Calvin. Calvin.
B, they don't want to tell the baby its gender.
You don't want to tell the baby its gender? What do you think it is?
That's what I said as well.
B as well. And the answer is, it's A!
No way! The force is strong.
Yes, the force is strong. Yeah, her sister's basically a huge Star Wars fan and wanted to call the baby Chewie.
Oh, OK.
After the character Chewbacca. Well, one of my exes used to call me that when I got angry. I'll show you why. Look at me.
That is very frightening.
He goes, Chewbacca, and he would run.
Never underestimate the power of the dark side of the Nana.
The dark side, that's all you don't underestimate. But eventually they settled on Becca, which is nice, not Bacca. Which apparently is Chewbacca for short. So is it OK to name a child after a fictional character? Well, you've got some interesting names for your kids, Limit. What are you calling yours?
Minnie and Micro. It's nicknames.
Minnie and Micro.
Well, Minnie's the older one, Micro's the other one. I've had another one that'll be Nano. But she knows. She's called Minnie, but she's also called Angelina, and she understands the difference. Maria's not quite talking yet, but she'll be happy with Micro. It's fine. I didn't even think that Chewie's such a bad name. What I know is you get thousands of Chantels because of the famous Chantel on television and that kind of thing. There'll be millions of Nanas quite soon.
Well, there are loads of Nanas anyway.
No doubt.
Nana Grandmas and Eton Garner, it's one of the most common names, and even men are called it. What about you? You haven't got any kids, but...
I don't know.
Oh, none that you know.
I'll probably give them a nice, solid biblical name.
Like Jeremiah.
Yeah, that's a good one. Or Isaiah or something like that.
Isaiah. That's nice.
Probably something more New Testament, actually. But it's funny the names that survived and the names that haven't.
Well, my kids are called Africa, with a K in it, and Ivory.
That's cool.
Thank you.
That is cool.
Ivory's
That's
the boy.
the right answer,
Ivory's
by
the
way.
boys. Ivory's the boys. A fictional character, just Africa,
Which
Mother
one's
Earth.
best behaved?
Probably Ivory.
Can't answer that question.
No.
You've wounded the other one for life now.
She's a teenager. She doesn't do anything. She goes, no. Right, question 2. Please play along at home. Nearest guess wins. How many eggs has an Iraqi man balanced on his back, on the back of his hand, sorry, to match the world record?
Eggs on the back of his hand.
Lembit.
12.
12. Kelvin.
11.
11. Let's see. The answer is 18.
I win.
Well done.
I win.
Have we got a photo?
Ibrahim Sadiq matched the record set by Brit Jack Harris in 2020. So I'm going to ask her. I'm scared of this one, but I'll start with you, Calvin. It'll probably be safer. Do you have any strange talents?
I don't think so, no. That's
So untrue.
Lembit, have you...
I do, yeah. I can't do it now because it's difficult to film, but I got to within one of the world record for the number of 10-pence pieces I could catch like that.
How many was
in the
that?
back of my arm. 32.
32.
32, and I could do it. I'll show you after the show.
Was this why you were an MP?
That's probably why I lost, because I spent all my time practicing doing that, yeah.
There'll be just an outflow of coins coming towards me. If I
what about
do
you?
I have any strange talents? Yeah, actually, I do, as it goes. I can do about 15 backflips in a row and finish off on a double back somersault.
Okay, yeah,
Can you do this after the show as well? And I'll show you my coin
I
trick.
simply haven't... Well, I don't think it's a big trade-off. I haven't got enough. And also, no, I don't think so. There's not enough room in here in the studio, and Angelo might be unhappy if I break one of the cameras.
I'll give you a quid.
3. Question 3. True or false? An American man was left disappointed after his vintage Pikachu Pokemon card fetched just $500,000. True or false?
True.
You think it's true?
I'll say it's false.
Okay.
One of us is going to be right.
Well, let's see. The answer is false.
Oh, well done.
He was very, very pleased. Because it actually went for £900,000.
I knew that.
So have you got an expensive collectible item at all? Have you? Have you got anything?
I got a motorbike. Yeah, a very special motorbike. A Suzuki GS 750, one of the early superbikes.
Right.
Did you know that I actually did, as my special subject on Celebrity Mastermind, the history of Japanese motorcycles?
And where did you come in that?
I got 14 in the specialist round, actually.
But did you win, though? You didn't?
No, I came second.
No.
It wasn't bad, though. Come on, give me a break.
You didn't win.
I didn't win.
I've still got my marbles from primary school, and I've
You've
still got my
still got
pogs
marbles?
from middle school. I used to love collecting pogs. I was quite good at that game.
What?
Pogs.
I don't even know what they are.
I don't know how
We haven't got time to explain it. I'll tell you what I collect. Clothes.
Oh, of course.
And I had some of my clothes that I wear, I've had them for like 20, 30 years.
As you can see, same here.
Yes, I can see. All right, question 4. What does a man in Nottinghamshire believe that he spotted outside the Nottinghamshire village of Steventon even? Is it A, an ancient temple, B, a 6-foot-man goat, or C, a stone that looks exactly like Vladimir Putin? Lembit.
I'm going for A. C's too obvious.
Okay.
I'll go for B. As a Nottinghamshire man, there's plenty of 6-foot goat men up there.
Well, it's B, actually.
Oh,
Yeah,
no.
you were absolutely right, Calvin. He spotted a 6-foot
about
goat.
jammy.
He
That's
said
so
it was
jammy.
Plenty of those in Nottingham.
He said it was about the height of a person.
Yeah,
That's
we've
what
all
he
seen
said. Yeah, it's true. And apparently it had sort of long, sort of powerful legs and stuff, and seemed to move in a circular, fluid fashion.
Part
Have
of
you ever spotted-
British history.
Do you think you've ever spotted anything paranormal? Apart from the goat man?
No, because paranormal things don't exist.
No, you're wrong.
Okay, fair enough.
I did, for another time in detail, I actually had a grant to do research into paranormal phenomena, and I proved without doubt that the work of the father of parapsychology, J.B. Rhine, was right. I'll show you the book, Reach of the Mind.
Right about
Girl, sounds
But
really
if it
interesting.
happens,
Thank you
Will.
for that, Lambert.
Oh, come on. Don't ask if you don't want to.
Well, the winner, Lambert, 2-1, actually. So
I got at least
not
2
bad.
questions right there.
I feel the hand of history on my shoulder.
Well, they're adding up in my ears, and that's
Which
what
history?
they
Black
said.
history or white history?
Well, listen, I'm going to say thank you so much to my fabulous panel, Lambert Opic, and also Calvin Robinson for joining me today. And a big thank you to you at home for joining me too. I'll be back tomorrow at 4. I'll leave you with the weather. Have a good day.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking dry for most, but with rain and strong winds moving into the northwest. Let's take a look at the details. A dry evening and night for Plymouth and southwest England with plenty of clear spells. Staying on the windy side, especially over high ground and along northern and western coasts. For London and southeast England, it will also be a breezy, dry and clear evening with little in the way of cloud in the sky. It's a similar story for Cardiff and South Wales, although a windier evening here than further east, especially over hills and coasts. Temperatures this evening will be around 5 to 7 degrees Celsius. A dry evening with clear skies for Birmingham and the West Midlands. Again, it will be on the breezy side, but overall it will remain settled with temperatures of 5 to 7 degrees Celsius. More of the same across northeastern England with dry and clear conditions dominating, some breezy or windy conditions at times, and evening temperatures in the range of 5 to 8 degrees Celsius. A largely dry evening for southern Scotland, although with broken or overcast cloud persisting for most. The best of any clear spells across northern and eastern areas, temperatures of 6 to 8 Celsius. Across the Irish Sea, it'll be a cloudy evening for Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland will keep the cloud and southerly winds, allowing for mild conditions to persist overnight. Tomorrow staying dry across most of the UK, but with rain and strong winds edging into the northwest and far west overnight. And that's how...
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.